It was a crisp Monday morning. The kind of morning where the sun's golden rays spill through the blinds, hinting at a fresh start. Downtown, the streets buzzed with the sounds of commuters, honking horns, and hurried footsteps. People were heading to work, coffee cups in hand, faces determined to make it through another day. Among them was Angela Morris, a poised black woman in her early 40s. She wore a tailored navy blue suit, the kind that commanded quiet respect. Her natural curls framed her face, and though her eyes carried the weight of responsibility, there was a quiet grace about her. To the strangers passing by, she looked like any other professional woman heading into her day. But Angela wasn't just anyone. She was about to take on one of the most powerful roles in the city, the newly appointed chief of police. No one on the street knew it yet, not even the officers patrolling nearby. Angela decided to stop at a local cafe before her first official briefing at headquarters. She wanted a moment of calm, a simple coffee, before stepping into a job that was guaranteed to test every ounce of her strength. As she waited in line, she noticed two uniformed officers across the street. One of them, Officer Daniel Briggs, stood with his arms crossed, glaring at passers-by with a sense of ownership over the sidewalk. He was known for his temper, though Angela didn't know that yet. What she did know, deep in her bones, was that moments like these, the small, ordinary ones, often carried the seeds of something bigger. And she was right, because in less than 5 minutes, Angela's life, and the lives of everyone in that cafe, would be turned upside down. Angela paid for her coffee and stepped outside, the paper cup warm against her palm. She was about to cross the street when she heard it, an aggressive bark. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" She turned. Officer Briggs was pointing directly at her. Angela froze, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Briggs stormed toward her, his partner trailing a few steps behind. "Don't play smart with me. What are you doing around here this early?" His tone was dripping with suspicion. His eyes narrowed like she had already committed a crime. Angela blinked, stunned. "I'm getting coffee, on my way to work." But Briggs didn't believe her. To him, Angela wasn't a professional woman heading to her office. No, his bias told him something else entirely. "Let me see your ID," he snapped, standing uncomfortably close. Angela hesitated. She knew her rights. She also knew that in less than 2 hours, she would be standing in front of every officer in this city, including Briggs, introducing herself as their new leader. The irony cut deep. "Officer," she said carefully, "I don't believe I'm required to show you my ID unless I've done something wrong. And I haven't." Her calm composure only fueled Briggs's anger. His jaw tightened, his face turning red. The partner shifted uncomfortably, clearly uneasy but unwilling to step in. "You think you're above the law?" Briggs sneered. Then, without warning, he raised his cup and threw hot coffee directly at Angela. Gasps erupted from bystanders. Angela stumbled back, her suit stained, her skin stinging from the heat. For a split second, the world went silent, just the sound of liquid dripping onto the pavement. But inside Angela, a storm raged. Not from humiliation, not even from pain, but from a controlled fire that had been building for years. Still, she didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, she stood tall. Her voice, low but steady, cut through the chaos. "You'll regret that." Briggs scoffed, rolling his eyes. "What are you gonna do? File a complaint? Good luck with that." But Angela didn't move. She didn't shout. She simply met his gaze, and something in her expression made even the partner shift nervously. Because behind those eyes was authority Briggs couldn't yet comprehend. Moments later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. The driver hurried out, holding the back door open. "Chief Morris," he said respectfully, loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. "The briefing room is ready." The cafe went silent. Bystanders turned their heads, jaws dropping. The words hung in the air like a gavel striking down. "Chief Morris." Briggs blinked, his smug grin faltering. He glanced between Angela and the driver, realization dawning. Angela brushed the coffee from her sleeve, then stepped forward, directly into Briggs's personal space. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Officer Briggs," she said, her tone cutting sharper than any blade. "You've just assaulted the new chief of police." Gasps rippled again. The partner's face went pale. Briggs's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, his confidence crumbled. Angela leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper, but everyone could hear the authority behind it. "You thought I was powerless. You thought I didn't belong here. But starting today, every action you take answers to me." The silence was deafening. Even the city noises seemed to pause. Briggs's hand twitched nervously at his side, his arrogance collapsing into fear. Angela straightened, turning toward the SUV. But before she stepped in, she glanced back at the stunned crowd. Her voice rang out, clear and resolute. "Let this be a lesson. Justice is not about who you think someone is. It's about what's right." The driver opened the door, and Angela slid inside. The SUV pulled away, leaving Briggs frozen on the sidewalk, his reputation already in ruins. But deep down, Angela knew this was just the beginning. Because men like Briggs didn't fall quietly. And behind him, in the shadows, lurked others, waiting, watching, ready to push back against the change she represented. And soon, they would strike. This story isn't just about one officer's arrogance. It's about the everyday prejudice that poisons trust, dignity, and justice. It shows how power, when wielded recklessly, destroys respect. But when faced with truth, it crumbles. But Angela Morris's fight is only beginning. Because as she walked into her new role as chief of police, she didn't just inherit an office, she inherited enemies. And the first strike against her was already being planned. When Officer Briggs threw that scalding coffee in Angela's face, he thought he was humiliating a stranger. Instead, he had just assaulted his brand new boss, the city's first black female police chief. The fallout should have been simple. Accountability, suspension, justice. But as we all know, power doesn't crumble quietly. Sometimes, it fights back. And this was only the beginning. The video hit the internet within hours. A teenager across the street had caught the entire thing on their phone. The arrogance in Briggs' face, the burning coffee, and the way Angela didn't flinch. By morning, it had millions of views. Headlines blared, "Racist officer attacks black woman, unaware she's his chief." On talk shows, Angela was praised for her composure. Protesters marched with signs saying "Stand with Chief Angela." The public saw her as a symbol of strength. But inside the precinct, whispers spread like wildfire. Some applauded her, but others resented her. To them, she wasn't a symbol. She was a threat. Officer Briggs was suspended pending investigation. To outsiders, it looked like justice. But behind closed doors, Briggs was boiling with rage. In his small, dimly lit apartment, he stared at the video replaying on his phone. Over and over. Each time, his jaw clenched tighter. "She made me look weak," he spat. "She humiliated me. I'll make her pay." Late one night, Briggs sat across from his longtime partner, Officer Lewis Carter. Carter wasn't as loud, wasn't as hot-tempered, but loyalty bound him. He owed Briggs, and Briggs knew it. Over beers, Briggs leaned in, voice low. "She's not here to clean up the department, Lewis. She's here to destroy it. And if we don't stop her, we're finished." Carter hesitated. He wasn't sure. But Briggs pressed harder. "You think she cares about us? About brotherhood? She'll cut us loose the second it helps her career. We have to strike first." And so, the plan began. They started with whispers. Briggs and Carter told anyone who'd listened that Angela had provoked him that morning, that she'd been power-tripping, that she'd wanted to make an example out of him. But whispers weren't enough. So they escalated. Files began to appear, falsified expense reports, doctored documents, painting Angela as someone who had misused department funds even before her first week. It was a dirty trick, and it was working. Inside City Hall, doubt spread. Politicians who once cheered her appointment now exchanged wary glances. Maybe Chief Angela wasn't the hero she seemed to be. Angela noticed the shift. Orders she gave weren't followed. Reports went missing. Allies who had stood by her suddenly avoided eye contact. One evening, as she stayed late reviewing paperwork, Captain Ruiz, a quiet veteran with 30 years in the force, closed her office door behind him. His face was pale. "Chief," he whispered, "something's moving against you. Files are being altered. Stories are spreading. They're trying to bury you before you even start." Angela leaned back in her chair, the weight of it settling in. She had expected resistance. But this was war. A week later, Angela walked into a city council meeting. She thought it was about routine budget approvals, reform discussions. She wore her sharpest navy blazer, prepared to speak about transparency and rebuilding trust. But as she stepped into the chamber, she noticed the atmosphere. Tense. Reporters packed the back row. Council members shuffled papers nervously. Something was wrong. When the chair called the meeting to order, the first item wasn't reform. It wasn't policy. It was her. A councilman cleared his throat, reading aloud. "Chief Angela Reynolds is under investigation for alleged misuse of police department funds prior to her swearing in. Documents suggest embezzlement of resources." Gasps filled the room. Cameras flashed. Angela froze. "What?" She rose to her feet. "That's a lie," she said firmly. "Fabricated. I have never." But her words were drowned out by the storm. Reporters shouted questions. Council members whispered. To the public watching live, it didn't matter if it was true or false. The seed of doubt had been planted. And Briggs? He was watching from the gallery, a smug grin stretching across his face. Every word of the accusation was part of the trap he'd set. Angela tried to explain, but each denial sounded defensive. Each protest was twisted against her. It was airtight. Too airtight. Someone higher up was helping Briggs. The corruption wasn't just in the precinct. It had roots in City Hall. And then, the moment that chilled her more than the accusations themselves. As she gathered her notes, someone slipped a folded piece of paper into her folder. No one saw. No one noticed. When she opened it later, her hands trembled as she read the words. "They're not just after your job. They're after your life. Watch your back." That night, Angela left the council building with flashing cameras blinding her, reporters hurling questions like stones. Her reputation, once shining, was now under fire. But from across the street, leaning against a darkened alley, Briggs lit a cigarette, his grin illuminated by the flame. "This is just the beginning," he muttered. Angela glanced around, the note still burning in her pocket. She had walked into this job thinking she was fighting for reform. Now, she realized, she was fighting for survival. They thought the smear campaign would break her. They thought the lies, the whispers, the forged documents would end her career before it began. But what they didn't know was that Angela Reynolds didn't climb this high by bowing to bullies. The Brotherhood had declared war, and Angela was about to fight back, quietly, strategically, and in the shadows. Angela sat alone in her office that night, the city's skyline glowing outside her window. The note still burned in her pocket. "They're not just after your job. They're after your life. Watch your back." She replayed the events of the council meeting, how the accusations seemed too polished, too perfectly timed. This wasn't sloppy corruption. This was orchestrated. Angela leaned back, her mind racing. She couldn't confront them head-on. Briggs had backup, political allies, dirty cops, maybe even city leaders. No, if she wanted the truth, she'd have to play their game. But smarter. So she started with someone she could trust. Captain Ruiz. He had warned her before, and now, as she sat across from him in the dim precinct break room, she laid it out. "Angela, they've built something organized, Ruiz. This isn't just Briggs being reckless. This is a network. Ruiz, you're right. I've heard whispers for years about a group inside the force. They call themselves the Brotherhood. They protect their own, cover each other's tracks. And anyone who threatens that. He hesitated, lowering his voice. They disappear. Angela's heart sank. She had suspected corruption, but not something this entrenched. Still, Ruiz's warning only fueled her determination. Angela knew she couldn't fight this battle alone. So she began quietly reaching out. Select officers with reputations for honesty, integrity. She didn't tell them everything, just enough to test their loyalty. Some turned away, afraid of crossing the Brotherhood, but others leaned in. Detective Maya Brooks, sharp-eyed and relentless, agreed to help. She had her own scars, cases sabotaged, evidence buried when it pointed to officers in uniform. And then there was Officer Jordan Lee, young but idealistic. He had seen enough behind the curtain to know the system was rotten. Together, under Angela's careful guidance, they began a counter-investigation, unofficial, off the record. Late nights, secret meetings in Angela's office, files spread across her desk. They combed through arrest records, financial reports, disciplinary files. Patterns emerged. The same officers tied to lost evidence. The same names reappearing in misconduct complaints, always dismissed, always covered up. And at the center of it all, Briggs. But while Angela built her secret circle, Briggs wasn't sitting still. His suspension only fueled his anger. From his apartment, he called meetings with Carter and a handful of loyalists. They gathered in shadowy bars, speaking in code, plotting their next move. Briggs slammed his fist on the table. Briggs, she's digging. I can feel it. Someone's feeding her information. We find out who it is, we cut them off. For good. The Brotherhood listened. Some laughed, confident. Others nodded grimly. They had power, influence, even muscle. And if Angela thought she could outsmart them, they'd prove her wrong. Within days, Angela noticed the pressure. Her allies started getting warnings. Detective Brooks found a threatening note under her windshield wiper. Stay out of this, or we'll bury you. Officer Lee was suddenly reassigned to night shifts in dangerous districts, an obvious attempt to isolate him. And Captain Ruiz? Someone leaked an old personal scandal to the press, tarnishing his reputation overnight. Angela's circle was shrinking, but she refused to stop. One evening, in her office, Angela spread out the files they'd collected. She circled names, drew lines, connected the dots. And then, she froze. A name she hadn't expected appeared again and again. Not Briggs. Not Carter. A councilman. Someone inside City Hall. The Brotherhood wasn't just cops covering each other. It was politicians, judges, a web of power that stretched far beyond the precinct. Angela whispered to herself, "This is bigger than I thought. So much bigger." Just as Angela began to piece things together, the Brotherhood made their boldest move yet. A fake tip was called into dispatch, an armed robbery in progress. The address given? Detective Brooks's home. SWAT raided her house at midnight, guns drawn, terrifying her family. When no weapons or suspects were found, the mistake was shrugged off as a clerical error. But Angela knew better. This wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. She called an emergency meeting with Ruiz and Lee. Her voice was low but firm. "Angela, they're trying to scare us, break us. But fear only works if we let it. We keep digging, and when the time is right, we strike back." But as she spoke, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. Her blood ran cold as she read it. "Chief Reynolds, meet us tomorrow night. We have information about the Brotherhood. Come alone, or the next mistake will be fatal." Angela stared at the message, the room falling silent around her. It could be a trap. It could be salvation. Either way, it was the only lead she had. She slipped the phone back into her pocket, her jaw set. "Tomorrow night," she whispered, "we find out just how deep this goes." But outside her window, in the shadows of the street, Briggs stood watching. Cigarette smoke curled into the night air. "She thinks she's hunting us," he muttered with a grin. But tomorrow, she walked straight into the lion's den. The text message was clear. "Meet us tomorrow night. Come alone. Angela Reynolds knew it smelled like a trap, but she also knew something else. If she ignored it, she'd lose the one chance to pull the Brotherhood into the light. And so, she went. The night was cold. Angela parked her car 2 blocks from the abandoned warehouse, her badge tucked out of sight. Her every instinct screamed danger, but her resolve didn't waver. Inside, the air reeked of rust and damp wood. Shadows stretched long across the cracked concrete floor. Then, movement. 2 figures stepped from the darkness. Men in plain clothes, their faces hidden under caps. Stranger, Chief Reynolds. Brave of you to come alone. Angela, steady, you said you had information about the Brotherhood. Stranger, smirking, we do. But first, a test of trust. The taller one tossed a file at her feet. Inside were copies of disciplinary reports, all doctored. They showed her closest allies, Brooks, Lee, even Ruiz, as dirty cops. Angela, these are fake. You're trying to turn me against my own people. Stranger, leaning closer, or maybe you just don't know them as well as you think. Angela's jaw tightened. She didn't believe them, but she knew what this was. A setup. And then, the trap closed. From the shadows, more figures emerged. 6, 7, 10 men. All armed. All Brotherhood. And leading them was Briggs. His smug grin cut through the dark like a knife. Briggs, well, Chief. You should have listened when I said you didn't belong here. You thought you could dig into our world and walk away. Angela didn't flinch. Angela, you call yourselves a Brotherhood, but you're just cowards hiding behind badges. The people deserve better. Briggs, laughing, the people don't care. They see what we tell them to see. And by tomorrow morning, they'll see you as the corrupt one. He snapped his fingers. One officer stepped forward, holding a hidden camera. Angela realized the plan. Lure her here, stage a confrontation, then release evidence making her look like the criminal. But Briggs had made one mistake. Angela hadn't come alone after all. In the rafters above, Detective Brooks crouched in the shadows, phone camera rolling. Every word, every threat was being captured. Angela had risked everything, tipping Brooks off in secret. But the Brotherhood wasn't blind. One of the men caught a flicker of light. He shouted. A gun fired. Brooks barely ducked behind the beam as bullets tore through the wood. The warehouse exploded into chaos. Angela dove for cover, her heart pounding. Briggs barked orders. Briggs, find her. End this. Angela ran, weaving between crates, her mind racing. She didn't have a weapon, only her training and her will. She needed to survive long enough for Brooks to escape with the footage. Meanwhile, outside the warehouse, another wave of Brotherhood officers made their move. Ruiz, stationed in a car nearby, saw them first. He reached for his radio, then froze as a gun pressed against his temple. It was Carter, Briggs's loyal enforcer. Carter, you picked the wrong side, Ruiz. Tonight, we clean house. At the same time, Officer Lee, positioned as lookout, was ambushed from behind. He fought hard, but 2 Brotherhood men dragged him into the shadows, fists flying. Angela's allies were falling, one by one. Inside, Angela could hear the commotion. Her chest tightened. She'd led them into danger. But she couldn't afford guilt. Not now. Not when everything was at stake. Angela ducked into an office at the far end of the warehouse. Papers littered the floor, old blueprints of the building. She slammed the door shut, catching her breath. Her phone buzzed. Brooks again. Brooks, whispering, I've got everything on tape. But I'm pinned down. They're closing in. Angela's mind raced. If Brooks was captured, the evidence would vanish. She spotted a fire alarm on the wall. Without hesitation, she yanked it. The warehouse erupted in noise, red lights flashing. Sprinklers burst overhead, drenching everything. The distraction gave Brooks her chance. She bolted from the rafters, sprinting toward the exit as Briggs roared in fury. Briggs, don't let her leave. Bring her down. Gunshots rang out. Brooks dove through the side door, disappearing into the night. Angela allowed herself the smallest smile. One win, one step closer. But then, her office door crashed open. Briggs stood there, soaked and seething. For the first time, Angela and Briggs were alone. He grabbed her by the collar, slamming her against the wall. His face twisted with rage. "Briggs, you think this ends with a video? I own half this city. Judges, politicians, even your so-called friends. When the dust settles, Chief, you'll be nothing but a headline." Angela met his gaze, unflinching. "Angela, you're wrong. Because no matter how deep your rock goes, there will always be light. And I'll be the one to shine it." Briggs sneered. He pulled his gun, pressing it to her forehead. But before he could pull the trigger, headlights cut across the warehouse windows. Sirens wailed outside. Backup, real backup. Angela's heart leapt until she saw the look on Briggs's face. He wasn't afraid. He was smiling. The warehouse doors burst open. But it wasn't SWAT. It wasn't her allies. It was more brotherhood. Dozens of them, flooding the building, armed and ready. Angela realized too late. The trap hadn't just been for her. It was for all of them. Briggs, whispering in her ear, "Welcome to the endgame, Chief." The screen fades to black. Sirens screamed outside the warehouse. Red and blue lights flashed against wet concrete. But these weren't saviors. They weren't allies. They were part of the brotherhood. Angela Reynolds, the city's first black female police chief, had walked into their trap. And now, with Briggs's gun pressed against her skull and dozens of officers pouring in, she realized something chilling. The brotherhood wasn't just a group of rogue cops. They were the system. Briggs shoved Angela to the ground, his laughter echoing off the dripping walls. "Briggs, Chief Reynolds, you really thought you'd outplay us? This is our city. Always has been." Angela's pulse hammered. Around her, the brotherhood tightened their circle. The warehouse doors clanged shut behind them, locking her in. But Angela wasn't one to break under pressure. With a surge of strength, she slammed her shoulder into Briggs, knocking him off balance. His gun clattered across the floor. In the chaos, she bolted toward the fire exit. Bullets cracked past her ears. Concrete dust exploded as rounds slammed into the wall. She burst through the door into the freezing night. Rain hammered down, mixing with the roar of engines. A black SUV screeched into the alley, Brooks at the wheel. Brooks, yelling, "Chief, get in." Angela dove into the passenger seat. Tires screeched as Brooks floored it, the SUV fishtailing down the slick street. In the rearview mirror, Angela watched headlights multiply. Brotherhood cruisers swarmed behind them. This wasn't just a chase. This was a hunt. They didn't stop until they'd reached the safe house, a rundown apartment 2 neighborhoods over. The blinds were drawn, the room lit only by a single flickering lamp. Angela's clothes clung to her skin, her chest still heaving from the escape. Brooks, Chief, they were everywhere. How did they know? How deep does this go? Angela didn't answer right away. She paced the room, replaying the night in her mind. The trap hadn't just been Briggs. It had been orchestrated, planned with precision. And that meant someone higher, someone untouchable, was pulling the strings. Her phone buzzed. A message. No name, just words. "Stop digging. Or next time, it won't just be you." Angela's grip tightened around the phone. Whoever sent this knew where she was. Her blood ran cold. The next morning, Angela walked into City Hall. Her badge weighed heavy on her chest, her every step echoing in the marble halls. She had a meeting scheduled with Mayor Donovan, the man who had publicly supported her appointment as chief. If there was anyone who could help dismantle the Brotherhood from the top, it had to be him. But as she entered his office, her stomach sank. Sitting beside him was Briggs. The same Briggs who had tried to kill her the night before now leaned casually in a chair, sipping coffee as though nothing had happened. "Angela," coldly, "what is he doing here?" Mayor Donovan, smiling thinly, "Chief Reynolds, Officer Briggs has raised serious concerns about your conduct, about your loyalties." Angela's heart pounded. She looked at the mayor, searching his face for any sign that this was a misunderstanding. But his eyes were calm, calculated. In that instant, she understood. The mayor wasn't just aware of the Brotherhood. He was protecting it. Within hours, headlines exploded across the city. Police chief under investigation for corruption. Anonymous sources question Reynolds' leadership. Whistleblower claims chief working with criminal gangs. Angela stared at the news feeds in disbelief. Photos of her leaving the warehouse were plastered everywhere. Cropped, edited, distorted to make her look guilty. Brooks slammed his fist against the wall. Brooks, they're rewriting the story, making you the villain. Angela, quietly, that was always the plan. Discredit me before I can expose them. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Step down, chief, or watch your allies disappear, one by one. She glanced at Brooks, at Ruiz, at Lee. Good cops who had risked everything to stand by her. And she realized the Brotherhood wasn't just targeting her reputation. They were targeting her people. That night, Angela sat alone in her office, the weight of the city pressing down on her shoulders. She could resign, protect her allies by stepping out of the line of fire. Or she could fight, knowing the Brotherhood would stop at nothing to destroy everyone close to her. Her eyes landed on a framed photo of her father, an old civil rights attorney who had once told her, "Angela, the measure of justice isn't how safe you feel. It's how many people you're willing to protect, even when you're afraid." Her decision crystallized. She wouldn't back down, but she also knew she couldn't fight this battle in the open anymore. If the Brotherhood controlled City Hall, the courts, and half her department, then she'd need to go underground. Build her own network, a shadow operation to match theirs. Angela called her closest allies to a secret meeting in the basement of an abandoned library. Brooks, Ruiz, Lee. 3 good cops against a corrupted empire. Angela, they think they own this city. They think fear will break us. But they've underestimated something. Truth. We'll find it. We'll expose it. And when we do, even their power won't save them. Her allies nodded, determination burning in their eyes. But then Ruiz spoke, voice tight. "Ruiz, Chief, I think it's worse than you know. I've been tracking campaign donations. Money laundering. All of it ties back to one place." Angela leaned forward. "Angela, where?" Ruiz swallowed hard. "Ruiz, the governor's office." The room went silent. Angela's heart sank. If Ruiz was right, then the Brotherhood's reach didn't just stretch across her department. It reached the highest levels of state power. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. The scale of the battle had just multiplied. And then, her phone buzzed once more. A video message. She opened it and froze. It was Ruiz, tied to a chair, a gun to his head. Briggs's voice filled the room. "Briggs, on video you want to play war. Chief, let's see how many soldiers you're willing to lose." The screen cut to black. Angela Reynolds had faced down liars, bigots, and bullies her whole career. But nothing prepared her for this. Her ally, Detective Ruiz, was in Brotherhood custody. And if she didn't act fast, he wouldn't live to see the sunrise. The Brotherhood had made its move. Now, it was Angela's turn. The video replayed in Angela's mind. Ruiz, tied to a chair, bruised and blooded, with a gun pressed against his temple. Briggs's voice, mocking, taunting. "Briggs, in the video you want to fight us. Chief, save him, if you can." Angela slammed her fist against the desk. The walls of the safe house shook. Time wasn't on her side. The Brotherhood didn't bluff. If they'd taken Ruiz, they planned to make an example of him, just like they'd done with others who stood in their way. But this time, Angela wasn't going to sit back. She called Brooks and Lee into the room. Both looked pale, tense, but ready. "Angela, we don't wait. We hit them first. We get Ruiz back, tonight." Brooks, hesitant. "Chief, that's suicide. They'll expect it." "Angela, good. Let them expect me. They still don't understand who I am." Angela knew she couldn't storm in blindly. She needed intel. She went to an old contact, a retired cop named Harris, once a Brotherhood insider, who'd left when the corruption got too dark even for him. The man lived alone in a rundown trailer on the edge of the city, drowning his conscience in cheap whiskey. At first, he refused to talk. Harris, bitterly, "You don't know what you're up against, Chief. These men, they're not cops anymore. They're soldiers. And soldiers don't lose." Angela leaned in, her voice razor-sharp. "Angela, if you ever wore that badge with pride, then you know what it means to protect your own. Ruiz has hours left, maybe less. You want to die a coward? Or you want to help me take them down?" Harris stared at her. For the first time in years, guilt flickered in his eyes. Finally, he slid a crumpled notebook across the table. "Harris, they've got a warehouse on the docks. They use it for things the public shouldn't see. If your detective's still alive, he'll be there." Angela grabbed the notebook. Coordinates, guard rotations, entry points. She nodded once. The hunt was on. Night cloaked the city in silence. At the docks, fog rolled off the water, swallowing the orange glow of floodlights. Angela crouched behind a stack of shipping containers, Brooks and Lee at her side. In the distance, armed Brotherhood officers patrolled the perimeter, rifles slung across their shoulders. Every second they hesitated, Ruiz's life slipped further away. Angela whispered into her earpiece. "Angela, 2 on the left. Brooks, take them when they pass. Lee, cover the north door. I'll breach." Her team nodded. Then, like shadows, they moved. Brooks lunged, silently dropping one guard with a chokehold while Lee neutralized another. Angela slid through the side door, weapon drawn, heart pounding. The warehouse was dimly lit. The stench of oil and blood filled the air. And in the center of the room, Ruiz, tied to the chair, head slumped forward, and standing over him, Briggs. Briggs smirked when he saw her. Briggs, well, the chief herself. Couldn't resist, could you? Angela raised her weapon, steady despite the storm inside her chest. "Angela, step away from him, Briggs. Now." Briggs chuckled, circling Ruiz like a predator with its prey. "Briggs, you don't get it, do you? This city needs us. The Brotherhood keeps order. You think the mayor runs things? The governor? They do what we tell them. Always have." Angela's jaw tightened. "Angela, you're not keeping order. You're feeding off fear. But tonight, that ends." Briggs's smile widened. He snapped his fingers. From the shadows, more Brotherhood officers emerged, rifles raised, surrounding her. Angela's finger tightened on the trigger. Outnumbered, outgunned. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Suddenly, a gunshot cracked through the air. One of the Brotherhood officers collapsed. Then another. Brooks and Lee stormed in, covering Angela with precision fire. Chaos erupted. Angela dove forward, tackling Briggs before he could pull the trigger on Ruiz. The two crashed to the ground, fists flying. Briggs, snarling, "You don't belong here, Chief. You never did." Angela, through clenched teeth, "That's where you're wrong. I belong anywhere justice does." With a final surge, she slammed her knee into his chest, knocking the wind out of him. Briggs's gun skidded across the floor. Angela grabbed it, aiming squarely between his eyes. The room fell silent. "Angela, call them off, or you don't walk out of here." Briggs glared at her, but then, with a reluctant sneer, raised his hand. The Brotherhood lowered their weapons. Angela cut Ruiz free, pulling him into her arms. He was alive, barely, but alive. They escaped into the night. Briggs left cuffed to his own chair, spitting curses. Back at the safe house, Ruiz lay on a cot, his breathing ragged but steady. Angela sat by his side, exhaustion heavy in her bones. Brooks poured her a cup of coffee, his voice low. "Brooks, you saved him, Chief." But Briggs won't stay down. His two connected. Angela stared into the steam rising from the cup. He was right. Briggs wasn't the head of the snake. He was just the Fang. The Brotherhood's power stretched into politics, business, the very heart of the justice system. Tonight had been a victory, but it was only one battle in a much bigger war. And Angela knew the Brotherhood wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The next morning, Angela received an unmarked envelope slipped under her office door. Inside was a single photograph. It was her sister, smiling outside her home, unaware of the shadow watching her from across the street. Beneath the photo were 4 words, scrawled in black ink. Next, it's family. Angela's hands trembled, but her resolve hardened. The Brotherhood had declared war, and now it was personal. Angela Reynolds had saved Ruiz from the Brotherhood's clutches. But victories against men like Briggs were temporary. The Brotherhood wasn't just going to strike back. They were going to burn everything she loved to the ground. And this time, their message wouldn't just target her badge. It would target her heart. The morning sun spilled over the city, deceptively peaceful. Angela sat at her desk, the photo of her sister still clutched in her hand. She hadn't told Ruiz or the others about the threat. Not yet. Her sister, Denise, was the one person she'd kept out of this life. The anchor who reminded her she was more than just a chief, more than just a soldier in this war. And now, Denise was in danger. Angela stared at the photograph, her jaw tight. Angela, quietly, they want to come after family? Then they'll find out what I do when it's personal. Before she could plan her next move, Brooks burst into her office. Brooks, urgent, chief. We've got a situation. Explosion downtown. They're saying it's Brotherhood related. Angela shot to her feet. Another attack. Another life shattered. And she knew this was only the beginning. Angela's vision blurred. The world closed in. And then, she spotted it. Her sister's locket, still in her pocket. She clenched it tight, drawing strength from the memory. With one last surge, she drove her knee into Briggs's ribs, twisted free, and slammed him hard against the railing. Angela pinned him there, her gun pressed to his chest. Angela, low, deadly, this is for Denise. But just as she pulled the trigger, Briggs laughed. Briggs, go ahead. Make me a martyr. Kill me, and the Brotherhood grows stronger. Angela's finger trembled on the trigger. He was right. His death could ignite something bigger. Justice wasn't just about revenge. It was about making sure no one else lived in fear. Angela lowered the gun. Instead, she cuffed him. The same way he'd cuffed countless innocent lives. Angela, no, Briggs. You don't get to be a martyr. You get to rot. Down below, the battle was over. The Brotherhood's men were disarmed, their masks ripped away, their names exposed. But the victory was hollow. As Angela walked Briggs past the wreckage, she saw Ruiz being carried out on a stretcher again. This time unconscious, his body riddled with injuries. Brooks limped past her, blood on his uniform. The price of this night had been steep. And it wasn't over. Because for every name they arrested, there were more out there. More shadows. More snakes waiting to strike. Angela looked back at the steel mill one last time. It wasn't just a battlefield. It was a graveyard, for her sister, for her officers, for her city's innocence. Back at headquarters, as dawn broke, Angela sat alone in her office. Her phone buzzed. A message. No number. Just words. Nice work, Chief. You took down a lieutenant. But the general is still waiting. Attached was a photo. A powerful senator, shaking hands with Briggs. Angela's stomach turned. She realized the Brotherhood wasn't just in the streets. It was in Washington. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a war far larger than she had imagined. Angela had cornered her enemy. She had won the battle. But the war? The war had only just begun.